1964 was a terrible year for American auto racing. In both NASCAR and IndyCar, driver fatalities were a regular occurrence. Perhaps the most chilling display of this tragic era was NASCAR's Augusta 510 at Augusta International Raceway. Held in November 1963, the race has become infamous for the chilling fate of its competitors. Out of the top 7 finishers, 6 died in the next 14 months. Augusta International Raceway was a motorsports facility in northeastern Georgia. The massive complex had several racetracks, including a drag strip, a half-mile dirt track, and a 3-mile road course. NASCAR first raced at the dirt track in June 1962. After 4 races there, NASCAR moved over to the newly completed road course, with the first race scheduled for November 17, 1963. The road course was 3 miles long and had some eye-opening turn names. There was Cemetery Hill, named for a nearby cemetery. On the back part of the track, Alligator Hollow was a series of S's near an infield lake. The track was expected to be very fast and one of the premier road courses in the United States. In the Southeast, there were no others like it. The 1963 NASCAR season ended on November 3rd in Riverside, California, but NASCAR couldn't wait to start the 1964 schedule. 1 week after the season-ending race, the first event of the 1964 calendar was held at Concord Speedway on November 10th. After a Ned Jarrett victory, the stock cars went to the new track. Once practice began, it was discovered that Augusta was a much slower circuit than anyone expected. A lap around the track was roughly 2 minutes. With a race distance of 510 miles already set, officials knew it would be hard to complete the entire race. The green flag was scheduled for just after 12 o'clock, and NASCAR declared the checkered flag would be thrown at 5 o'clock no matter how many laps were run. NASCAR leadership was also unhappy with the layout of the track. The turns were too tight, and the cars were going too slow, and the grandstands were way too far from the track. Bill France made no secret of his concerns. Just 30 minutes before the race began, he complained to the press that those problems would have to be changed before NASCAR ever returned. Seeing that there were many problems, the track president had to act. In the middle of the race, the president came over the public address system and announced to the crowd a list of changes that would be made. Next year, the cars would run directly in front of the stands. Alligator Hollow would be straightened out, and Turn 1 would be banked higher like Daytona to increase speeds. A disappointing crowd of 17,000 spectators were reportedly bored by extra careful drivers. Only one caution was thrown, and the race was a 5-hour parade of cars tiptoeing around the tricky circuit. At 5 o'clock, curfew was reached and the checkered flag was thrown, with 31 laps still remaining. Despite plans to redesign, NASCAR never returned to the road course and instead went back to the half-mile track just a few yards away. By the next race in late 1964, the short track had been paved. While the Augusta 510 was full of problems, its lasting legacy was downright dark. On a national level, the race was held just 5 days before President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. The competitors in the race were also cursed, with 6 of the top 7 finishers dying in the next 14 months. The fate of each racer was different, each one a reminder of how dangerous the era truly was. First, there was Larry Thomas, who competed in 126 NASCAR races between 1961 and 1964 with a best finish of 2nd. Thomas would go on to finish 8th in the 64-point standings. At 5:20 on the morning of January 25, 1965, Thomas's passenger car drove off the side of I-75 in Tifton, Georgia, and landed upside down at the bottom of a 35-foot embankment. Jimmy Pardue was a popular and polite driver from North Carolina, described by some as having the appearance of a college professor. Known as Genial Jim, Pardue's number 54 car carried him to 2 wins between 1962 and 63. On September 22, 1964, Pardue was running tire tests at the Charlotte Motor Speedway with several other drivers, including Richard Petty. Entering the 3rd turn, Pardue had a tire or mechanical failure, which sent him crashing head-on into the guardrail at 147 miles per hour. The car crashed through the guardrail and flew 300 feet through the air before coming to rest upside down in a drainage ditch. Badly injured, Pardue was pulled from his car by Larry Thomas and Darrell Derringer. He died at the hospital 2 hours later. Pardue's car owner hired Larry Thomas to replace the fallen driver for the remainder of the '64 season. Ned Jarrett was the only one of the top 7 finishers at Augusta who would see the end of 1965. Jarrett won the championship that year and retired at the end of 1966. Gentleman Ned then entered a career in broadcasting and became one of the most prominent figures in NASCAR history, entering the Hall of Fame in its second class. On Wednesday, November 14th, Joe Weatherly experienced the highest of highs and lowest of lows. On that day, he was officially declared the champion for the 1963 season. While everyone knew Joe had earned the most points in 1963, the championship wasn't official until NASCAR declared it days after. After winning the 1962 and 63 championship, he began the new season hoping to become the first driver to win 3 in a row. At Augusta, his quest for another title was jeopardized in qualifying when he spun at Alligator Hollow and flipped 10 times down a 75-foot embankment into a group of trees and swamp. The champion walked away with only a skinned knee and bruises. With his primary car owned by Bud Moore destroyed, Joe was given a Mercury by Bill Strope to run in the race. Starting 8th, Weatherly's race was smooth and consistent, and he finished 4th. He left Augusta with a points lead. However, Joe became the first driver to lose his life after the race. On January 19th, Weatherly died during a race at Riverside. In 1963, 33-year-old Billy Wade began competing in NASCAR on a regular basis. Driving for Cotton Owens, Wade was part of a 2-car operation with his teammate being David Pearson. After getting 14 top 10 finishes in 1963, he entered the following season winless so far in his career. After finishing 3rd at Augusta, the Texas native looked for a good season. After Joe Weatherly's death in January, Bud Moore hired Wade to replace him. In July 1964, Billy won 4 races in a row, the first and only wins of his career. After finishing 4th in the 1964 standings, Wade went to Daytona for a Goodyear tire test in January of '65. Daytona International Speedway just replaced its guardrail with a concrete wall to prevent cars from leaving the track like Lee Petty in 1961 and like Jimmy Pardue had in Charlotte. Upon seeing the new concrete, Wade remarked, quote, "Every racetrack should have a wall like this." On January 5th, Wade would lose his life against that barrier. After running a lap of over 170 miles per hour, Wade blew a right front tire entering turn 1 and hit the wall with the right side. The massive impact killed him instantly. Dave MacDonald was one of the brightest stars in American road racing by the time of the Augusta 510. A native of California, MacDonald raced Cobras for Carroll Shelby and was one of the best drivers Ford had. 1 month before the Augusta 510, MacDonald beat Roger Penske to win SCCA's LA Times Grand Prix at Riverside. 3 weeks later, he drove for the Wood Brothers and dominated the NASCAR race at Riverside. Only mechanical problems forced him to settle for 2nd. At Augusta, Ford got a ride with Holman Moody as a teammate to Fred Lorenzen and Fireball Roberts, once again driving Fords. He qualified on day 2 of time trials, placing him 11th on the starting grid. Early in the race, MacDonald spun in turn 2 but recovered to finish 2nd. He returned to Augusta in March with his Shelby teammate Ken Miles, the main character in the 2019 film Ford vs. Ferrari. Miles and MacDonald won a pair of races. With a very bright future in racing, Dave accepted a ride with Mickey Thompson to race in the Indianapolis 500, but the effort was plagued with a poor handling car. On lap 2 of the 500, MacDonald spun exiting turn 4 and crashed, dying alongside Eddie Sachs in the fiery inferno that followed. Fireball Roberts had an unfair advantage entering the Augusta 510. He owned part of the track. When construction began, Fireball was on the board of directors and designed part of the Augusta course. He ran tire tests and knew the circuit better than anyone else. After starting 2nd, Roberts led the first 3 laps. He then drove a smooth race while Richard Petty, David Pearson, Junior Johnson, and Marvin Panch took turns up front. After they all fell out of the race with mechanical problems, Roberts retook the lead on lap 129. He pitted with 3 laps to go for fuel and beat MacDonald by a full lap. After the race, Roberts talked about how physical the track was, his hands sore from shifting and his neck in pain from the twisting forces. The Augusta 510 would be Fireball's last win. At the World 600 in May, Roberts was seriously burned in a lap 8 crash with Ned Jarrett and Junior Johnson. He died from his injuries on July 2nd. The Augusta International Raceway closed in 1970 but remains abandoned in the Georgia forest. A community has been built around it, and a non-profit group is working to preserve the track as a park. Streets in the housing development honor the fallen drivers who wanted Augusta. There's Ken Miles Drive, Dave MacDonald Drive, and Glenn Fireball Roberts Drive.